Maria Davis, a goal-setting coach that has been helping students and teachers achieve their goals for years, and I'm here to help you do the same. I believe life isn't about chasing after what you want. It's about accessing the unique power that's already inside of you so you can step into the life of your wildest dreams. If you're looking to do life differently, live a life that's designed just for you, make your dreams a reality, and ditch the hustle, then you're in the right place. My goal for this podcast is to give you tools, resources, and tips to discover who you are at your most authentic level, help you get back in the driver's seat of your life, and send you love and encouragement along the way. Welcome to It's the Audacity for Me. Hello and welcome back to It's the Audacity for Me. I am your host, Maria Davis, and this week we are talking about taking responsibility for your life so that you can step into your personal power. Before we get into all that, I have a few updates to share with you. I have been loving summer. I'm loving the air conditioning, really, if we're being honest. But I've spent my summer hanging out with my husband and my kids, and I've been reading a lot. And there was a book that I came across that I've been reading. I'm about halfway through it, although it is a pretty short read. I've had to kind of step back from it because it's so good that I need time to digest what I've read before I can move on with it. So the book is titled The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I'm sorry if I'm butchering it. But it is really, really good. I'm just going to read the little description that's in the fold of the cover. So you have a little idea of if it's something that you want to read, and I will link it in the show notes for you as well. But I thought it was really, really good, and I think it's something that everyone should read. So let me read you this excerpt. Paulo Coelho's enchanting novel has inspired a devoted following around the world. This story, dazzling in its powerful simplicity and soul-stirring wisdom, is about an Andalusian shepherd boy named Santiago who travels from his homeland in Spain to the Egyptian desert in search of a treasure buried near the pyramids. Along the way, he meets a gypsy woman, a man who calls himself king, and an alchemist, all of whom point Santiago in the direction of his quest. No one knows what the treasure is, or if Santiago will be able to surmount the obstacles in his path. But what starts out as a journey to find worldly goods turns into a discovery of the treasure found within. Lush, evocative, and deeply humane, the story of Santiago is an eternal testament to the transforming power of our dreams and the importance of listening to our hearts. So that was the little description on the inside of the cover. So I wanted to share that with you because I found it so good. So I would hate to not share. All right, so I will be linking that in the show notes. A couple other things. Website, podcast updates. I will have a special series coming onto the podcast. I'm going to upload the audio onto the podcast for a free workbook and training that I'm doing at the end of this month. So it will be a 5-part audio series, and along with it, you can grab a free workbook. It's titled Who Are You? And it dives into really who you are at your very core and how to live in the best version of yourself and reach your dreams, but doing it authentically. So I will keep you posted on dates for that, and be on the lookout. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe so you can catch the free audio trainings on the podcast, and you can go to the website and grab that workbook once it's available. All right, last update. Tentatively, I'm doing lives on TikTok with coaching and just things like that, kind of an extension of the podcast, a little more information on different topics from the podcast. So I'm doing it at 10 a.m. on Thursdays right now. That could change. Just keep an eye out. If you haven't already, follow me on all the things, Instagram at hippiewood.co. TikTok is at Ria Dene, and all the links will be in the show notes. So you can grab everything there. But I am ready to move right along into our episode because it is something so, so important. How to take responsibility for your life so that you can step into your personal power. It's a really powerful mindset shift, and it's something that really changed my life. We're going to discuss the difference between responsibility and fault and what it means to take responsibility for your life, and specifically what it really looks like, feels like, all of that. And we're going to finish out by talking about how responsibility taking responsibility for your life gives you back your power and allows you to step into the best version of yourself and reach all your dreams. Step into your highest potential, all that good stuff. So I am going to take a quick break, grab a drink of water, grab yourself a drink, and I'll see you in a sec. Okay, so quick story time. I have always been an incredibly hard worker. And I don't say that to brag or anything. I just like to work. I've always, just about as long as I can think of, I mean, there were a couple gaps, but pretty much always had 2 jobs at a time for most of my life, if not more. I've always been incredibly resilient and I find ways to make things happen. I thought that meant that I was totally independent and fully responsible for my life. That in my mind said that I had it. I took care of myself. Whatever. Independent, responsible. And I was, sort of. I mean, I was making it work. I was alive, right? Like I was eating and things like that. And I was taking responsibility for the things that needed to get done. I was living my life and I was going through the day to day. I'm so sorry. Let me turn my notifications off. There we go. All right. So I was living my day to day, getting up, taking the kids to school, doing whatever. But I was just miserable. I felt like a robot. And a lot of it was because there were things that were holding me back that I wasn't taking responsibility for. And I didn't even know that at the time. And I feel like there are plenty of situations out there. There's plenty of people out there. You might even be one of those people that feels a certain way or just like doesn't feel whole or happy or, whatever, insert your adjective there, characteristic. There's so many people out there who are miserable and they don't even know why. And I was one of those people. And it's been something that I've really hardcore been focused on for like the past 2 years, maybe, taking responsibility and working through the things from my past so that I can live authentically in the present and I can be myself in the present. I can set boundaries in the present and all of those things. So I want to talk about how I stopped being miserable. I stopped blaming everyone else for the consequences of my past circumstances, my past traumas, shortcomings, etc. Here's the part where it's kind of a harsh truth, and this is where I want to explain the difference between responsibility and fault, because a lot of people interchange those, and they're not always the same. So I'm going to give the example of a car accident. If 2 people get into a car accident, the insurance company wants to know who's at fault, right? Or who's responsible, who caused the accident. And when you use those words like that interchangeably, they kind of mean the same thing, but there's a difference. And it's really important when it comes to taking responsibility versus owning fault of something. So here's this crucial difference. Responsibility is owning up to something or taking care of something, even if it wasn't your fault, even if you didn't cause the problem. Responsibility is still taking care of the mess that problem leaves behind. So let's say you get into a car accident, but let's say it's like a bush or, like an inanimate object. It only really affected you. So you might not have caused that, like a deer might have run out in front of you or something, to where you had to swerve and you hit a bush. But ultimately, you have to take responsibility for that if you want a working vehicle. Same thing in your life. You might not be at fault for your past trauma, and I am never going to put that on someone. No one is at fault for terrible things that happen to them. But and I'm talking like big traumas here, but what I'm trying to say is that fault is the cause. Responsibility is cleaning up the mess that was caused. So I was reading this book. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F. I won't say the full word because I know, kids might be in the car while you're listening to this podcast, and I don't want to hinder anybody's ability to listen. But it's by Mark Manson, and I'll link that in the show notes as well. But the concept is really well explained in the book. He gives an example of a baby left on a doorstep. So the person whose house it is where the baby is, like, let's say somebody leaves the baby on the doorstep, rings the doorbell, runs away, they open the door, baby's just there, right? So the person who answers the door has to take responsibility. There's a baby on their doorstep. They have to do something about it because it's affecting the present. The fault is what happened. The person who dropped that baby off, they're at fault for abandoning the baby. But the person who is at the door is still responsible for handling it. It's still at their doorstep. So let's bring this back to us, or, individuals. If something bad happened to you that wasn't your fault, again, not your fault, don't take responsibility, do take responsibility for the present, but don't accept fault for something that wasn't your fault. And that's a whole nother conversation. But what I'm saying is, just because you take responsibility for something does not mean you're accepting fault for it. But it applies to anything that's still impacting the way that you live your life today based on something that happened in the past. And that was the crucial difference that made me go from miserable to living my dream life. I didn't have to accept fault for things that totally, absolutely were not my fault, but I do have to take responsibility for how it's impacted me in order to better my life today and be fully present and enjoy my life and the people that I love and spending time with them. So let's say, you had trauma in your past that's, that's not your fault. It could be impacting your relationships today, the way that you interact with other people. You can insert whatever problems that it's caused for you. But until you, seek therapy or do some journaling or, whatever it is for your specific situation, I don't want to get too specific with that. But until you do whatever it takes to own that part, you're still going to be held back by it, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. So what we're going to do is take a quick little break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how we go about doing this and some ways that you can do it. All right, see you in a sec. So how do you go about doing this? It's a good question, and it might seem a little bit overwhelming, but many of the ways that I was impacted in my present from things in my past came in the form of limiting beliefs. And if you don't know what a limiting belief is, it's something that we believe to be true, but isn't necessarily true in all circumstances. So I'm just going to use a really broad example. Let's say you have the limiting belief that you can only be a billionaire if you work really hard and you work long days and long hours and you can never see your family and you have to sacrifice everything to become a billionaire. Well, that's a limiting belief and not reality, because I can see examples where that's not true. So there's plenty of billionaires that got that way because of inheritances, or maybe they won the lottery, or, maybe they had just some crazy incident that made them a billionaire, or maybe they started a business that was aligned with them and they get to work their own hours and they're a billionaire. All kinds of ways that you can become a billionaire without sacrificing your whole life. So that's an example of a limiting belief. I can definitely give more of those if anyone is curious. Send me a message if you want to know more about limiting beliefs. Maybe I'll do a whole episode on that. But I digress. So some of the ways that I would be impacted would be how I would react in certain situations, or especially assumptions. And I know that's like a really broad term, so let me get kind of more specific. It's kind of like a limiting belief, but I would have an assumption that everyone had an ulterior motive behind everything that they did. So let's say my best friend, who I know loves me, I love her, like we're best friends. But let's say she didn't text me back for like 3 days. Instead of thinking like, oh, she's probably busy, or maybe she didn't read my message or whatever, my mind would go to like, she hates me. She doesn't like me anymore. We're not best friends anymore. I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but I feel like everyone's done that to a certain extent. Or just going out in public and feeling like people are staring at you, or especially with the ulterior motive. Somebody would do something nice for me and I would automatically just assume that they were going to want something back from me. And I would never take anything from anyone or accept anything from anyone because I always felt like there was something behind it. No one can do anything nice without there being some sort of motive behind it. And that's not true. That's a limiting belief. And while it might still be the case in some situations, I no longer approach everything with that mentality. So the person that holds the door open for me isn't going to expect something of me later simply because they did something kind. And I feel like most of us do this to some degree or another. I gave a little bit of an extreme example, but maybe you feel uncomfortable when someone compliments you, or maybe it's awkward when someone unexpectedly gifts you something. You have to stop assuming that someone is expecting you to do something in return for them, especially if they did something without you knowing it or asking them to do it. And I do want to put this like little asterisk here and just say that the people that do this, the people that will do something for you and expect something in return, if you didn't ask them to do that for you and then they later hold it over your head, please do not feel guilty. Please understand that you never asked for that, whatever it is that they did, and you are in no way responsible to reciprocate a favor that you didn't ask for. Hopefully that makes sense. That was just a little caveat that is just a thing that aggravates me, so wanted to share. Another thing that I personally had to let go of was examining all the subtext for clues that a person didn't like me. Maybe I'm extreme, maybe I'm the exception, maybe I'm crazy, and maybe I'm only talking to a small percentage of people, but maybe I'm not. I just want to say, if someone's angry with you, they will tell you. And if they don't tell you, then it's not your responsibility. You cannot be expected to read someone's mind, and if they aren't telling you, you're probably not even the cause. And if you are the cause and they don't tell you, that's not on you. Taking responsibility for your life helps you to show up authentically as yourself, being present, living your life, loving your life, enjoying every minute without everything from your past dragging you down and holding you back in a place that you don't belong. We've moved on. We've grown. We don't need it. So that's what I'm saying. Take responsibility for your life so you can be here now. It means owning up to your mistakes. It means working through your traumas so it can stop hurting you in the present and forgiving yourself and others so your past can stay in your past. I consciously started taking responsibility in this way about 2 years ago. And before I could take responsibility, though, I had to know what I was even taking responsibility for. And that's kind of the overwhelming part. So let's take a quick little break. And when I come back, let's dive deeper. Remember I said I was miserable and I didn't know why? Well, here were some things that were kind of the problem. I was blaming my misery on being overweight. I was blaming it on being stressed. I was blaming it on my relationship, on my finances, on everything but myself. And yeah, I was overweight and I was stressed and I was all of those things. But were those problems why I was miserable? Or were those problems a symptom of being miserable? Once I started understanding and working through my past problems, I was no longer in the victim mentality. And oddly enough, that is never in a million years how I would have described myself. I was anything but a victim. I was strong. I was independent. I didn't take anything from anyone. I didn't expect anything. I took care of myself. But what I've learned is that the strongest people are usually the ones that can face their own demons. Not everyone else's. The true problem was the limiting beliefs, and in order to find those, I had to make space for my emotions. And this is kind of where it gets messy. I had to give myself permission to cry, to be vulnerable, to be able to have an opinion, to take up space, to be able to stand up for myself. And I know this sounds backwards, but to treat myself the way I treated others. So many of us talk to ourselves and treat ourselves in ways that we wouldn't treat someone we didn't like. We look in the mirror and tell ourselves horrible things. We are, completing work projects and telling ourselves how terrible we are. I still treat others with kindness and I go above and beyond for people I don't even know, but I'm still a recovering people pleaser. And I have learned and I'm still learning to love myself first because no one else has any, I don't want to say has any obligation to love you, but kind of. Like, no one's going to love you like you love yourself. And if you don't love yourself, it's going to be really hard to take up space and to have an opinion and to set boundaries and do all these things that are part of taking responsibility. So give yourself space, give yourself time, give yourself permission, give yourself forgiveness. So what can you actually do? I know all of that sounds nice, but what does that even look like? Like, how do you go about doing that? So first, you want to look for where you're still holding on to the past. And for me, this was just thoughts that kept coming up, or it would be like, let's say that I messed something up and I would go back to all of the past times that I've messed something up. And anytime that these feelings, beliefs, like past incidences, things like that, anytime that stuff comes up, give yourself space to really hash it out. You can journal, you can meditate, whatever your process is. I will tell you, I actually don't journal and I'm scared like all the people are going to come after me for that. But the reason that I don't do it is I have really bad carpal tunnel and I can only write a few sentences without before my hand goes numb. So what I like to do is I like to drive and I turn the music off and roll the windows down and I just think things through. I hash things out in my head. And sometimes I'll use my notes app and use like a text to speech type thing when I need to write it down and I need to remember it for later. But a lot of times I just kind of sit on it and I just think through all of the possibilities, the options, whatever. But you can use anything. You can journal, you can meditate, whatever your process is. As you process, you may notice patterns that keep repeating, and that's where you want to focus. So maybe it's the same belief that comes up or the same situation you keep finding yourself in. Maybe you keep finding yourself in these toxic friendships and you're not understanding what it is that keeps attracting these toxic people to you. Whatever it is, I want you to notice where that pattern is. Whatever keeps repeating in your life and throughout your life, that's where you need to look. And be present in the moment and notice when you feel even the slightest of emotions, happy, sad, mad, anything that triggers something from your past, a happy memory, a sad memory, and anything. That's the biggest thing, is noticing when you feel. So you start there, you notice when you feel certain things, and you notice when things come up. And then you be present to that and you really think through it. You dive into it. You ask yourself questions. You take a step further and ask why. What about this person, place, thing brought up that feeling for me? Is it similar to something that happened in the past? Is there a pattern here? Start asking yourself why behind everything. And it takes time. It's a habit to get into. But once you get in that habit, you will have so much clarity on your life and you will really feel empowered to make the changes that you want to make. Once you begin working through these emotions, you might notice that you're a little more emotional in your everyday life. And that part kind of sucks. But this is because you've allowed yourself to go there. And it's your subconscious like, okay, finally, we can let this stuff go. And so stuff's going to start coming up for you. And again, it sucks to be overly emotional. But it will even out once you work through these things and you'll come out so much better and happier. But you have to give yourself space to be able to process that. You have to give yourself time. You have to forgive yourself and forgive the people that hurt you too, because forgiveness doesn't mean saying that it's telling them that it's okay. It means letting it go from you, letting it not bother you anymore. So forgive yourself, forgive others, and just be happier. So hopefully this helped you understand the difference between fault and responsibility. And I really, really hope that I was able to give you steps that you can actually take action on today. Again, forgive yourself, forgive others, be present, and be you. If you enjoyed this episode or if anything stood out to you, please let me know by sharing on Instagram, tagging me, sending me a message, a carrier pigeon, whatever you want to do. Just let me know. I love hearing your feedback. If you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss the free audio training and PDF that's coming up. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the Instagrams, the TikToks, all the social things, all of that. So I hope that you guys have the most wonderful of days. I'll see you next time. Bye. Thank you so much for pressing play today. If today's chat inspired the audacity in you, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And be sure to leave a rating and review on iTunes to spread the love and help more people find the show. If you aren't already, be sure to follow me on social media so we can connect. Just choose your preferred platform. My links are all down below. Have a beautiful day, friends.